Today, I want to welcome Billy Broas. I met Billy through a mastermind, and he was talking about a messaging framework. And I think you should listen to this episode for a few reasons. One, Billy's an exceptionally good guy, and just connected with him immediately after meeting him. One of the reasons I like Billy, the second reason you should listen, is he takes something that can be complicated and simplifies it incredibly. The five light bulb system. And I think you're going to want to hear that. And the third reason is he has a book coming out that's sharing even more insights. And we're going to talk about that. But before we talk about all that, I just discovered he's a home brewer with quite an interesting background. So, Billy, welcome to Leaders and Legacies.
Hey, Craig, thanks for having me. Excited for this.
So, so you had your own homebrew website, or you still have it, or what's the deal?
I sold it. I sold it a few years back, but I had it for almost the better part of a decade.
Really?
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
What type of beers?
Oh man, well, did you know, Craig, that there are over 150 styles of beer out there? Most people think it's just either Bud Light and those types of beers or IPAs because we're swamped with IPAs here in Southern California. And although I love them, there's so many styles out there. So that was always my goal was to just brew the gambit and always try new things.
You know, the first time I ever had an IPA, I didn't had no idea what it was. We were doing a going away party for somebody, and at a place called the Ginger Man, which used to be downtown Austin. And I just asked the waitress, I said, bring me something with lots of flavor. And she's like, oh, okay, I'll bring you this. And she brought me a beer called Dogfish 90 Minute.
Ah.
And so I drank that and she's like, would you like another? I'm like, yeah, sure, that sounds great. And she brought another. And then she came back. She's like, would you like another beer? I'm like, yeah, yeah. And so I sat there and I drank three Dogfish 90 minutes. And then I stood up to leave and I was like, oh crap. Yeah, and for those that don't know, that's like drinking a six pack because every
That's
one
a
of those
strong beer.
suckers.
Yeah, that's a strong beer. You were feeling good.
Well, fortunately, I had an office downtown at the time, and so I just went in my office, fell asleep for a little bit, sobered up, and then drove home once I was sober. But what was your favorite beer to brew?
I liked IPAs. I like the British ales a lot. So a British I like things that are like, simple is kind of my thing. You mentioned a book and it's got simple in the title. That's really my word. And so although you see these, and this is a good life lesson, a business lesson. Although you see these beers that it's everything but the kitchen sink. It's like a 12% imperial stout with cinnamon and chocolate and coffee and all these things. The thing is, like, although that's fun, it's very easy to hide mistakes in those types of beers. And so
Hmm.
I was always very impressed by the beers, like a British mild. It's like such a boring, unassuming beer. It's like 4%. It doesn't have a very strong flavor. But if you make a mistake in that beer, it is just going to jump out at you. So that's why I like those types of beers, those simple ones, because they're so darn tough to make.
Wow. Wow. No, I get that. So, it's interesting. When I think about Steve Jobs, I think about somebody that was obsessed with simplicity and clarity. Is that something that just kind of goes through your life? You're always looking to simplify and remove clutter.
Yeah, and I've realized it more so I would say over the past 10 years. I think it's always kind of been there, but then I realized like there's these two different types of simplicity. There's the cheap, flimsy simplicity, and you might call that simplistic, but then there's the deep, profound type of simplicity. The simple that just has a lot of depth to it and it's just very powerful. Things like Einstein's equation is a great example. E equals mc squared. I mean, you write that down and that's not a lot of ink on the page, but just think about how profound that is, right? Just a few variables, and there's been books and books and books written about that. So that's the kind of simplicity that I'm a big fan of.
Yeah. Are you familiar with the six-word story?
Rings a bell, but tell me it.
So it's often attributed to Hemingway, but I think it was someone else. And it's a six-word story. Um, Baby shoes for sale, never worn. And it's one of those stories that as it sinks in, you're like, you start realizing the pain and the emotion of the story. You know, somebody bought baby shoes
Hmm.
and they're selling them, but they've never been worn. Why have they never been worn? And you know, you realize somebody lost their baby.
Yeah.
But just in those 6 words, a really, really powerful story.
Yeah, the word distillation comes to mind. You take that whole story with all the details and you distill it down to whatever those 6 words. And because it was distilled, I mean, not to go back to another alcohol reference, but it's kind of appropriate here, right? Because liquor is actually distilled from beer. I don't know if people know that, but you make beer and then you distill it into liquor. There's so much depth to that. You know, I mean, that story reminds me of one. I can't attribute this properly, but the story is we fought the British, we won.
Mm-hmm.
That's a story. Obviously, there are a million details that go along with that, but you can just feel the depth in that.
Yeah. Yeah. I tried to achieve that in one of my books, the Hope That Won't Die, that talks about where my my survival of death, and I was in a coma, and I at the end of the introduction tell this a little bit about how Karen came to me in my dream, or she came to me in my coma, and she spoke to me, and I heard her words, and they encouraged me. And then the next sentence, the concluding sentence is, I also heard the doctors, but they were saying much different things.
Hmm.
You know, just kind of leaving it with that weight of, the contrast of her words that were encouraging me to whatever the doctors were saying.
Yeah, it reminds me of white space. There's this idea of painting with white space, and it's what you leave out that really matters most. So, yeah, it's a topic that's near and dear to my heart, and I think we could all benefit from embracing more, not something that's simplistic, but simple but profound.
Yeah. Well, that's one of the things I love about your 5 light bulb messaging framework is I think when I first saw you present it, yeah, I don't know, maybe it felt like 15 minutes. I don't know if it was 15 minutes, but it felt like 15 minutes where you just kind of laid it out.
Hmm.
And it's like everything was immediately clear. And I understood why it was important. I understood why I should do it, and had a reasonable understanding of how to do it. So, what is your 5 light bulb system?
Yeah, so there are categories of messaging because I realize that messaging is the number one highest leverage activity when it comes to marketing. And I discovered this from the beer website. So I had a real job, and then I started this beer website on the side, and I was trying to sell my home beer brewing courses. I was teaching beer brewing through these online courses, and then I had to learn online marketing, of which I knew nothing about. And so I'm trying Facebook ads, I'm trying sales funnels, websites, social media, the whole thing. And because the career that I was in, I think this is why it's the case. I come from the energy industry where we study engineering and we study physics, and the idea of leverage was always very top of mind for me. And I just know that not everything is created equal. You might call it the 80-20 rule, right? There's one thing that you can do that will move the needle more than anything else, and I'm always on the hunt for that. And so after, and it took, a few years in marketing for me to realize, these Facebook ads, these product launches that we're doing, these sales funnels and all that, they do not matter as much as getting the words right. Because I can just rewrite a headline and double my sales. And that is very simple to me, but very powerful to me. So why am I messing around installing WordPress plugins for hours on end that don't move the needle at all when I can just double down on messaging? And that's what you're supposed to do. That's the rule. When you find the 80-20, you stop doing everything that's not that thing.
You know what that reminds me of is, uh, you know, when I was in the Marines, I was stationed over in Japan, and we were having a picnic on the Japanese side of base, and we saw them playing softball, so we thought, hey, we'll challenge them to a softball game,
Mhm.
and they killed us. I mean, they destroyed us. There are few times I've ever been that humiliated. Um, and we had one guy. Our nickname, his nickname for him was the Barbarian. I mean, the guy was like a walking muscle. We were expecting he was going to be hitting all the home runs, but what the Japanese did, the way they killed us was they weren't doing the fancy crap. They were doing the simple things very, very well.
Yeah.
They were doing the simple things well and repeatedly well.
Yeah. Yeah. The blocking and tackling.
Yeah.
In football, it's blocking and tackling. In base, I'm a baseball player. I love
Yeah.
baseball, and you're right. It's not swinging for the fences. It's making solid contact,
Yeah.
hitting line drives. Our coach would just drill that into us. Up is out. That's what he would always say. Up is out. Such a simple phrase, right? Meaning that if you try to swing up to hit a home run, you're gonna get out.
Yeah. So so when it comes to copy, what are those fundamentals? What is that essential simplicity?
Yeah, so the first thing I had to do is put it all in perspective. So I differentiate messaging from copywriting. And the way I do it is with the metaphor that I call upstream, downstream. So I believe in getting your core messaging in place. And what that can materialize in is we always put into a document. We call it a messaging map. So it's kind of like a brand manual, but instead of dictating your fonts and your colors and everything, it's your core persuasive messaging that you need to sell that product that you're selling, that product or service. And it makes sense to get that like really dialed in. And the way that we do that is with the five light bulbs. And I can walk through the five light bulbs in just a second if you want. But once we get that in, okay, that's your messaging. That's, you might think about that. That's the high leverage thing. Then we apply that, that's upstream. Then we apply that downstream to your Facebook ads, your website, your emails, and everything. Because the big problem that I noticed was in working with clients on marketing was that they would just dive right into the website and the emails and everything else without doing that upfront work of first getting the messaging in place. So that was the simple but not easy thing that I discovered was dial in that core messaging first. We like to use the five light bulbs, and then apply that to your copywriting, which I would call the marketing assets that your customers actually see, like your ads and your website.
Yeah. So what are the five light bulbs?
Yeah, so light bulb one represents your customer status quo. So this is language around the problem the customer is having. We call it the language of empathy because your customer really wants to be seen and heard. They want to think, oh man, Craig really gets me. And you know that it like if you have someone who describe, you've probably been in this experience, Craig, where someone's described the problem that you were having, whether it's like your physical health or whether it's your business health, even better than you could articulate it. And even without knowing what they do or what they sell, you assume that they have a solution, even if it's not through them. So that
Hmm.
light bulb one is really critical. Light bulb two then represents the other bridges and if you go to fivelightbulbs.com, you'll see the visual. That's why I'm saying bridges. We have a bear on the side of a chasm who's crossing this chasm. And there's all these different bridges that the bear could take, the bear representing your customer. And light bulb two represents those other bridges, those other options that your customer has tried before. And so when you're using the five light bulbs, you want to give voice to those options. You don't want to just ignore them. So you want to say why this other option your customer has tried hasn't worked for them, or why it has worked for them, or maybe it's just partially worked for them. You want to be honest about it. Okay, so what you do then is give voice to those other options. And if you're targeting the right kind of person who you can help, then that they should naturally be led to your option as the best option for them. That's represented by light bulb three. So light bulb three represents your unique approach to solving the problem. This might be your methodology. This might be your steps in your system. Like a lot of consultants and coaches have steps in the system that they follow. It's not your product. It's not where money is exchanged just yet. That's represented by light bulb four, which does represent your offer or your product. And that's just the vehicle to implement your approach. And then assuming that they have success with your product or service, they reach the other side of the bridge, which is light bulb five, and that's representing your customer's new life. So that's where they've had success and where the problem is solved. So those
Hmm.
are the five light bulbs. I know I went very quickly through that.
Yeah, that's cool. Um, well, I love the fact that it starts with empathy. And one of the phrases I like to use, yeah, so I'm big into first time offers. And one of the phrases I like to use is the unforgivable sin of first time offers is getting the pain points wrong. If you get the pain points wrong, it's all bets are off, and failure is likely. And so I kind of hear that. Is that what you're talking about in light bulb number one?
Yes, it could be. It depends on where they are in their journey. But yes, getting the pain point right is critical. And what you want to do, like what we often see is that we'll identify maybe 5 to 7 different light bulb ones. These might be 5 to 7 different problems that the customer is suffering from. And what you want to do, again, going back to this idea of the 80/20 rule and distillation, what is the one that's going to resonate the most with them? And so then what you can do, and great marketing is largely about experimentation and testing. We can test this light bulb one versus this light bulb one, problem A versus problem B, and we can see what resonates more. And when we find a winner, we can float that to the top, and that becomes the primary pain point or light bulb one. And then you can do that across all the different light bulbs. So that's why we're seeing now a lot of paid traffic agencies are using the 5 lightbulbs as a framework for split testing.
Oh, wow. Wow. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, it wasn't, I didn't plan on that. I just kind of, it turned out that way when I developed this thing. As these agencies started coming to me and like showing me, like, hey, Billy, we tested light bulb 3 versus light bulb 2, and light bulb 3 doubled the sales. I'm like, that is a good use of this thing.
Yeah. Wow. So, and just for clarity there, um, if you're testing, let's say light bulb one, you might test 5 different messages and see which one performs the best. Is that right?
Correct. You can test within a light bulb, so 5 different light bulb ones, or across the light bulb. So a light bulb 1 versus a light bulb 5.
Mm-hmm. Very cool. And so then light bulb two is things that they've tried before.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess that's a different level of empathy. It's just saying, it's you acknowledging, hey, we realize you've probably tried this, this, and this.
Yeah, a good way to think about this one is if you think about software companies, what you often see on their websites. You ever seen those comparison tables where it's
Mhm.
like, here's us, and then here's competitor A, B, and C. And then down the first column, right, there's these different categories like mobile app, and it'll have a check mark if that company has a mobile app. Right. That's a very straightforward way of doing it, but that's why I like that as an example. So you're essentially, to use a phrase from the sales world, you're identifying the buying criteria. You're helping your customer shop for products like yours.
Yeah. Okay. And then light bulb three is your approach. I've seen you write about having a proprietary framework or something like that. What's that mean to have a proprietary framework?
But it doesn't even need to be proprietary. Even just, okay, let me give you an example. So imagine that there is a CEO of a company and 2 consultants approach him or her. Consultant A says, I'm going to reduce your cost by 15%. Consultant B says, I'm going to reduce your cost by 15% by following these 3 steps. All else equal, if you're the CEO, who are you more likely to go with? And most people say consultant B. You say, why? Well, it's like, okay, because they have a methodology.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the key thing, is that you always want to be finding a better way of doing things. And even just identifying your steps in what you do, like what gets attention gets care and it gets improved. So even if your 3 steps are the same as the guy down the road, at least you have them. And because they're a central part of your focus, you're looking at them every day, they're naturally going to get improved. So that's why the people who see this, even if it's more intuitive, because I think it is, like in that example, you're like, oh yeah, I'd rather go with the second person, because you think, oh, well, there's a method to their madness. And I like that.
Yeah. Yeah. And so then light bulb four is your solution. How
Yeah, that's what most people think of when they think of marketing. And you'll instantly recognize this language. It's the language of buy now, buy one, get one free, 50% off, 30-day back money guarantee. Uh, and so, it's where the transaction is, very transactional language. But what we hear from people is when they learn the 5 lightbulbs, they say, oh, now I have other things to talk about.
yeah. Yeah. And so it doesn't stop at light bulb 4. It would be easy to think, okay, I got the offer, they bought the offer, we're done. But there's another light bulb. It's their their ideal I'm trying to avoid using my language. We call it the transformed state. What do you call it?
The customer's new life.
Customer's new life. I like that. That's a lot better. The customer's new life. And and why is that important again?
Well, this is so you want to, there's a distinction. I get what you're saying about it might make more sense to end with light bulb 4. There's a distinction between how the light bulbs are presented. And again, go to the website, fivelightbulbs.com, and you'll see the visual versus how they're used, how they're deployed. So you might think about them as ingredients, and you can arrange them in all different ways. And often, if we're writing a sales piece, like let's say it's a like a long form sales page, we'll often wrap up that sales page with Lightbulb 4 because that's where the call to action is. But the way it's presented, the framework is Lightbulb 5 as the last one because that is that other side of the bridge, and that one is so important. I find especially, and this actually goes into the book too, because people who are subject matter experts, and I work with a lot of them, they tend to take Lightbulb 5 for granted. They assume that the customer knows the benefits of their thing, and they get very obsessed with their thing, their Lightbulb 3 or 4. And so Lightbulb 5 is a reminder, hey, you still got to check that box and tell them what this thing does for them. You still need to answer that question, what's in it for me?
Yeah. Yeah. And I can see that. I can see that. I can see that myself. I can see that with other business owners. You spend so much time on light bulb 3. That's where your life is. And it's easy to obsess there. But when you do that, you're not communicating all the things to your potential buyer that you really need for them to catch the vision of why this is important to them.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Well, cool. Well, let's talk about the book a little bit. So you've got a book that's come out. It's called Simple Marketing for Smart People.
Mm-hmm.
I love that. Um, one, I hate the whole dummies series, and I get that, but um, I've never quite understood the idea of admitting that you're dumb in the title of books that you buy. I'd rather be a smart person. But for you, I guess, what's the book about? And what does it mean to have simple marketing for smart people?
Yeah, I hear you on the dummies book. Yeah, so this is if you've never felt cool grabbing that dummies book and be like, I'm a dummy, then grab Simple Marketing for Smart People because you will feel smart. And I promise if you read it, you will be smarter by the end of it. And it has a double meaning. I mean, yeah, we want people like who doesn't want to feel smart, but it's also this idea of being a subject matter expert, which again is a lot of the people I've historically worked with. They know their topic very, very well, but then they have the curse of knowledge. And so a lot of us, I'm sure a lot of your listeners are familiar with that curse of knowledge where you know so much that it's actually a double-edged sword and you have a hard time imagining what it's like to not have that knowledge. And so the book really takes that broad concept and applies it to marketing because the curse of knowledge is really the kiss of death when it comes to marketing. And the reason is that we assume that the customer knows all these things or that the prospect knows all these things. So what the book does is it addresses that fact, that curse of knowledge, and it gives you a system for surfacing a lot of those assumptions that you've been making about your customer so that you can then give voice to those and not just and not assume things anymore and really get on the same page as your customer. It's really a book about a mutual understanding between you and your customer so that when you meet there in the middle and you are on the same page, you can then lead them. You take them by the hand and lead them to eventually your product or service.
Yeah. And when we were talking, you said this has a lot of applications, even if you're not a marketer, if you're a business owner. You said this, and this really caught me by surprise. You said any manager, any leader should read this book.
Mm-hmm.
And because there's lessons of leadership in there. What are those lessons?
Well, if you're a leader, and let's say that you have direct reports, you have a team, there are no doubt that things that you assume that your team is on the same page on with you and with their fellow team members, and they're not on the same page at all. And so what you want to do is really surface those, you might call them myths or mistakes or misconceptions that they have. And then once you do that, then you can, it's really a process of education and really taking those false beliefs and instilling new beliefs around what you do and what you were trying to achieve. So I've been talking about this concept and writing about this for a few years now. And you're right, I've had interest from people, from business owners to teachers and college professors. I mean, this so applies to a classroom setting as well.
Hmm. So, I mean, if I read that, what would be some of the nuggets that I would take away from that? Where would be, what would be like the top three things that would just kind of make me kind of stop in my shoes and say, you know what, I need to rethink this?
Well, the big question that we pose in the book, which is a good one for all your listeners to ask, and this is going to apply to your customers, but it can apply to your team as well. The question is, what do my customers need to believe in order to buy?
Yeah.
What do my customers need to believe in order to buy? And that question is just like this magic wand that you can take that just surfaces all these assumptions they're making. So if you are let's say that you are a marketing agency, what do my customers need to believe in order to buy? Well, if you're doing Facebook ads, what do they need to believe? They need to believe that Facebook ads work. They need to believe that Facebook ads work in their industry. They need to believe things about you, that you're capable of running Facebook ads, that you have the credibility. So the list starts to add up pretty fast. And this is what we take you through in the book. And we provide a template for this. And then once you surface all these things, these beliefs, then you say, oh man, well, we have not been addressing these in our marketing material. So it becomes a big driver of then your marketing material.
Yeah. You know, and it's interesting. Belief systems is something I talk about a lot of, that when your customers come to you, they do have broken beliefs.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes those beliefs are really hard to change. You know, in the example I give, so you know a lot about my story. I was in a coma for 6 weeks, and when I woke up, I believed I could walk, and I got in this big argument with my wife about whether or not I could walk. You know, because
Mm-hmm.
I hated the hospital. I wanted out of there, and I wanted her to take me home. And we had this big argument, and it's so funny. I walked away from the argument believing she was wrong. She walked away from the argument believing I was wrong. All the facts were in her favor. And yeah, I still had that broken belief.
Mm-hmm.
And so, how do you tackle broken beliefs?
Yeah, so it's a spectrum. And so this also dictates where you spend your time, your energy, your resources in marketing. You want to start with you want to preach to the converted as much as possible because it takes a lot of time and education to change beliefs. Not that you can't do it, but depending on how deep-seated those beliefs are, it can be very difficult to change them. And I see a lot of people with their marketing not preaching to the converted, going to people who have beliefs that are just way off, and it takes a lot of time and money to do that. So start with the people who already have these beliefs, and so you do that. So you start with the people who already have these beliefs. You're going to wear them out pretty quick though, because that's a limited pool of people, right? It's the people who are just right around you. You think about it as concentric circles, and this is a graphic we show in the book. So the people with the beliefs that you already need for them to have in order to buy are right around you in this tight concentric circle. But then you have another circle beyond that, and those people have maybe half the beliefs. Okay, but there's a whole lot of people there and a whole lot of revenue there. So what do you do? Well, this is what marketing material is for. This is what a lot of people don't realize. This is the goal of marketing. It's to educate. So you educate, you're instilling these new beliefs. So now maybe instead of half the beliefs, now maybe they have all the beliefs. And in doing that, you're also making your argument for why they should buy from you. Because I'm sure you've been in a situation where if you're trying to argue, you ever been in a situation where you're trying to argue with someone, not like a heated argument, but like a debate style argument, right? It might be for something in like politics or in society. And if the person is just not as educated as you are on the subject, it's very hard for you to make your argument, isn't it?
Yeah.
Right. So, yeah, go ahead.
No, no, no. Please continue your thought.
So you educate, right? Because if they
Yeah.
were on the same page as you, if they knew what you knew, you can more effectively make your argument. So it's the same thing, whether you're debating something political or if you're a marketer making the case for why someone should buy your product. Educate, then argue.
Yeah. Very cool. Well, and I can see I mean, I can see how that broadly applies to leadership. If somebody has wrong, if you have an organization made up of people with the wrong beliefs, well, it's going to be hard to achieve the outcome that you're looking for.
It's amazing the assumptions you'll find that people have. Yeah, I mean, a big one that I come across in marketing is that marketing is evil,
Yeah,
or marketing is deception. So that's a
yeah,
very fundamental belief. And if we don't address that, like if I'm working with a client and we don't address that up front, this is what I mean by I'm such a big believer in coming to a mutual understanding. If we don't address that up front, everything downstream of that is going to be tainted because that person's looking at everything we're doing through the lens of marketing is evil. I'm looking at it through the lens of, well, of course, it's not evil. It's just how you use it, it's your intentions.
it's funny. I run into people and they're like, when they start realizing, because some of the tools that we use as marketers are like insanely powerful,
Mm.
and they say, well, you're manipulating people. And the example I go to is like, look, I can't make anybody bark like a dog. Now, if somebody wants to bark like a dog, I can influence what type of dog they want to bark like.
Mm.
But I can't make somebody that doesn't want to bark like a dog. But if they want to bark like a dog, I can make them bark like a greyhound. If that's, and I think that's kind of where marketing comes in. It's, another way of looking at it is, you have people with needs and you have people that can fulfill those needs. And so in some ways, it's kind of matchmaking and it's, helping bridge that connection. And, the problem, if we think about it in the context of little children, one of the problems that little children have is that they can't yet articulate their needs. And so they just cry.
Mm-hmm.
And, and so the job of the parent is to help them, one, to figure out what their needs are and do that. And I'm not trying to draw some crazy comparison that customers are like children or the other way around, but the simple fact is that a lifelong struggle of all of us is being able to articulate what we need. And even as adults, we're often not good at that. And that's a job that I see everything that you're talking about enabling that. It's creating a framework where people can understand their pain, understand why they've been unable to resolve their pain, understand how their pain could be resolved, what they need to do to resolve that pain, and what their new life will look like after it's been resolved.
Exactly. Yeah. And without that initial mutual understanding, you just can't lead that person to the place where you know that you can help them because that's ultimately what marketing is, trying to help someone get what they already want. I mean, the way I'm writing this book is a meta lesson in this. You notice the book is not called the Five Light Bulbs.
Right.
And the reason is that it's for the same reason. I needed a mutual understanding first before writing the Five Light Bulbs book, which will come out eventually. But this book, Simple Marketing for Smart People, it's the underpinning of it. It's the foundation for it. So I need personally, and I also need my readers to understand how the Five Light Bulbs was built. Once I achieve mutual understanding on that, which is delivered in Simple Marketing for Smart People, then I can move on to the Five Light Bulbs.
Yeah. Well, and you probably noticed this when I was laying it out. I'm not sure everybody did when I was talking about, you have a pain, you need to be able to articulate that pain, understand why it's there, what you can do to fix it, the action that you actually need to take. As I was going through that sequence, I was just going through your five light bulbs. And
Mm-hmm.
so for me, in that moment, it was a framework that helped me lay out all these steps. And all I had to do was follow the framework that you said you've so clearly laid out.
Yeah, it maps to the human experience of making a decision. In this case, a buying decision, but it could be any decision. You can use the five light bulbs for leadership too, right? Like, what's the direction of the company? What are our five light bulbs for the company? But the framework maps very well to the human experience of making a decision. So that's why it's very intuitive to people because we do this all the time.
Wow. Well, I love it. And the one thing I'm confident of is I need to do more of that. We were exchanging notes on LinkedIn about how, you posed the question, how often do you follow a framework? And I think my answer is I need to follow a framework more often. And I love the five light bulbs that you've laid out. So a couple questions. One, where can people get a copy of Simple Marketing for Smart People?
Go to Amazon, go to Amazon.com, type in Simple Marketing for Smart People, and you will find it there.
Okay. And how can people reach you?
Best way is through either the two main platforms I'm on are LinkedIn and Twitter, or X as it is now.
All right. Well, Billy, this has been great. Um, Thank you for bringing it. I love the simplicity, love the power of the tools that you've put together.
Awesome. I had a lot of fun, Craig. Yeah, thanks. You're a great interviewer, and I appreciate you having me.